Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's live Q&A. And this week we are talking about gut health. A lot of you have been familiar with gut health or heard about gut health and how important that it is. It's a huge topic, and we're just going to break down some of these different factors. Each week I have people asking me questions about different things, and so it just stimulates, some different perspectives. We talk about a lot of times what they've been through and maybe why standard medical testing is not getting to the root causes. And so let's just handle some of these different things. What I'm planning on as an outline going over today is that, understanding that your gut health is crucial. It's not just about your gut, it's about what the gut's connected to. And so we're going to go through three big things, which is how to know if your gut is unhealthy, okay? And how to know if your gut health is connected to the symptoms that you might have right now. And even if you don't really have gut symptoms, right? See, this gets really confusing. We'll also go over stages of gut healing. And then we'll go over some lifestyle changes that you can make right now to start to improve your gut health, to support your gut health, to not keep traumatizing it, even from a general perspective. Okay. And, I'm not somebody who loves general. I mean, I don't love a general approach. And that's part of our issue in our healthcare system is it's too general and we're focusing on the wrong things, and because there's a difference between crisis care and healthcare, and I gotta be careful about not going down different tangents on that. But you just gotta start to understand that there's differences here, and so I want to start to enlighten you about that. That's part of the reason why I do these Q&As. Let's get some more information out there. Let's get a lot of different perspective, because we have to have different perspective to get different results. And just because it's a different perspective, we've got to understand that a different perspective can also be accurate. Okay, it's not my theory, it's not my opinion, it's what science already says. It's just the way that we are approaching it is different and off. Okay, so we've got to be careful about our approach. So what we're going to cover today is how to know if your gut is unhealthy, how to know if it's connected to other symptoms that you might be having. And then also, you can have gut problems without having gut symptoms. We'll go through different stages of healing again in the gut, and then lifestyle changes you can make right now in order to improve your gut health. All right. So as we're diving in here, let's get some perspective here first, is that we've got to understand that, I think one of the biggest myths in healthcare is basing health off of how we look and how we feel. Okay. Now, a quick reference tool that you can think about is that, some of the biggest killers like heart disease and cancer, when do most people actually feel those, is typically towards the end, right? So you can have 80% of the time, the first sign of a heart problem is a heart attack or a stroke, and then you can have stage 4 cancer and not feel it. I've had so many people, since we're talking about the gut, that they go in for a screening test like a colonoscopy because they're turning 50, and they find polyps in there. They biopsy those polyps, and then those polyps are cancerous. And that person really feels fine. They don't really necessarily have any limitations in their life. They're just living life, and they're just doing what we've been told to do, is get a screening procedure. Now they're faced with a diagnosis and they had no idea. Okay, so remember, health is not how we look, how we feel. The biggest killers like heart disease and cancer, a lot of people don't feel until it's too late. It's at the end of the spectrum. And so we have to have a perspective there, and that, many times also is that we can have symptoms in one part of our body show up, but the root cause is in another part of your body. And this is very typical when it comes to gut health. So I have a lot of people with ears, nose, and throat problems, from allergies, sinus infections, ear infections, postnasal drip, breathing issues from asthma. I would say even, where people need a CPAP machine at night. There's a lot of ears, nose, and throat. These are like immune system type symptoms. And what happens is that you start to understand that about 80% of your immune system cells are found within your gut. And so when you're expressing symptoms around ears, nose, and throat, which are typically like immune system symptoms, even that's what even medicine would say about it, is that because your gut is a huge part of the immune system, if you're not addressing the gut, you can be treating all of these symptoms and taking a lot of medications, getting tonsils taken out, tubes put in the ears, lots of antibiotics. There's a lot of different things that happen to treat these symptoms, but yet the root causes are found within the gut. Hormones are another really big one. Okay. that your gut is a big driver for hormones directly, indirectly. And I'm going to cover this a little bit more, not as in depth as it probably needs to be, but I'll break up into different Q&As later on about gut and be more specific about the different sections. But with that said, immune system function and the stress response that happens within your gut will dictate and change your hormone activity as well. So what could that look like? I have tons of ladies with sleep issues, mood, energy problems, depression, anxiety. And so all of these symptoms are getting treated, but the root causes aren't being addressed. And a big time part of that root cause can definitely be the gut. So again, that there are these perspectives that health is not how we look or how we feel, that just because you have a symptom in one part of your body does not mean that that's the cause of your problem. And then this is very typical with the gut too. I have tons of people who have major gut issues going on, but they don't have a lot of gut symptoms, but they have these other symptoms in other parts of the body. Okay. And or that, think about this too, is that when we think about symptoms, we don't really, a lot of times it has to be severe for us to think that it's a problem. Okay. That we listen to like the yells instead of the whispers. And what I mean by that is that, there's lots of different symptoms that you can have in your gut that you're like, hey, that's not a big deal. Maybe it's a little bit of gas, maybe it's a little bit of bloating, maybe it's a little bit of acid reflux. Maybe it's a little bit of diarrhea, maybe it's a little bit of constipation. That there's these varying degrees of dysfunction. And if you listen to those, if you use symptoms, even the small ones, use symptoms as information, you can start to catch things sooner. Okay. And what I mean by that is that, a lot of people, again, when it comes to the gut, they don't necessarily think they have a gut problem until they're diagnosed with, acid reflux to GERD, maybe, ulcerative colitis to Crohn's disease to IBS in general or irritable bowel disease. There's all of these different diagnoses and labels that can be placed on the gut, but they don't think that there's really a problem until that happens. And part of that's the medical interpretation that, in medicine, you have to hit the medical threshold, you have to hit a diagnosis in order to be considered to have a problem. Now, a reason for that, though, guys, is because medical treatment. The scope of practice is medicine and surgery. Okay, that's what medical procedures are about, is medicine, therapies, surgery, and you technically have to hit a medical threshold in order for those treatments to be validated. Okay, and it's all part of the messed up, I'd say, messed up world of our treatments, waiting until we have big problems to call it a problem, doing the treatments that don't address the causes, that have their own side effects and more problem creation. We're neglecting the cause of the problem, so it just keeps getting worse. We are letting insurance dictate all of that, pharmaceutical companies. And so, there's a lot of stuff happening in that world. And that's why that's part of the reason why I tell everybody they got to become their own doctor, because you have to have some perspective on these things. And that's why I like to go over these. And I go over these things often, because without better perspective, then I'm just another person just telling you like, hey, you should do this. And this has been some of the biggest things in my life because of my experiences in my health and my wife's health that we gained clarity on, that have been able to help thousands of people. So that's why I'm talking about this. And some of you have heard it before, but it doesn't hurt to hear it again. Okay. Now, I did talk about this. Let me touch on this a little bit more, is that, that just because you get a diagnosis also, like, so we're talking about gut here. So just because you get a diagnosis in your gut does not mean that that's the cause of the problem. Okay. A diagnosis is the name to how the body's changed. It's a name to the physiology, what the tissues, the cells look like, but it doesn't tell you why it happened. Like, ulcerative colitis is a diagnosis in the gut. Okay. There's a certain presentation with that, symptoms, tissue, but ulcerative colitis is not the cause of the problem. It's the result of the causes. Okay. Now, this is a bit tricky because in medicine, they're going to say that's the cause of the problem. And so we're going to need to treat you with steroids, maybe even low dose chemotherapy. If that's not going to work, then we're going to take out your colon and you're going to have a colostomy bag for the rest of your life. Like these people, we got to know that there's more options in this. We have to have clarity again that also colitis is not the cause of the problem. It's a result. Think of it like this, is think of like so think of divorce, okay? So divorce is not the cause of the problem. Divorce is the result of choices that led up to that. Okay. I use that example a lot, not to make light of divorce. I don't think divorce is a light thing, but we can realize, understand that that's not the cause of the problem. That was a result, and that's what diagnoses are. Is they're the result of problems. We've just haven't been taught a different methodology. We haven't been taught causes versus effects, and so I'm wanting to enlighten you about that. So no matter what that diagnosis is in the gut, it's a result, and typically that the causes have not been addressed or evaluated. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. um, and so let's move on from there. So there's some different perspectives. Come back if you want to remember those perspectives. Come back and watch these replays on in my Instagram page or my YouTube channel. So let's dive into that first question a little bit more. Is that, if we can't base our health off of these things that I just mentioned, health isn't how we look or how we feel. It's not. It's just because you have symptoms or not, you don't have symptoms. It's very much a crapshoot. Like people don't know where to go with all of this, so it gets very confusing. And so the question becomes, well, then, if none of that's really helping us to get to the root causes, then should we be evaluating our gut health? And truly, this is functional medicine testing. This is the major reason why there's functional medicine testing. Now, there's different spectrums of functional medicine testing and functional medicine doctors. Okay, and so doctors practice in different ways. And I've always said, hey, listen, here's the root causes. Here's how the body's adapting. Here's what we need to test. Let's make sure it's comprehensive, meaning that you have the whole picture, not just one section. And the gut's very much like this too, because just because you have a gut problem doesn't mean that you just go in and do gut testing, because the stress response is a big part of gut health. And I'll talk about this some more here in a minute. But the functional medicine testing is designed to find these root causes and how the different systems of your body are functioning. And so there's these different aspects that need to be evaluated within these systems that will dictate, if these things are happening, it's going to stress your body. It's going to stress the cells. It's going to stress the organs and tissues. And as those organs become stressed, as those tissues become stressed, as those cells become stressed, if you allow that to happen long enough, now that creates the diagnosis. Okay, so there's a pattern to that. There's a sequence of events that take place to that. There's a hierarchy to that. And that's why I'm telling you that a diagnosis is a result, like divorce is a result of the choices that led up to it. Okay, have the choices that led up to it. And so what we got to understand is that functional medicine testing is designed for that. We need to evaluate the functions of the body, in this case gut functions, and when these functions have been disrupted, it creates the symptoms, conditions, and diagnoses. So if gut functions create our symptoms, conditions, and diagnoses, what we need to understand is, what should we be evaluating instead? Okay. And so a big time gut test, okay, and it's actually an immune system test, is again a big part of your immune system is in your gut. About 80% of the cells, okay, is a stool test. Okay. Now, so in the stool test, we're going to be evaluating different aspects. Okay. But what we got to number one look at is physical, chemical, emotional stressors. Okay. So your body's adapting to stressors all the time. And if it continually is stressed by physical, chemical, and emotional, then those tissues, those organs, those cells start to break down. Okay. Because people want to know, well, what creates these different factors within the gut? What can cause them to change? And it really breaks down into these physical, chemical, and emotional stressors. And I'll end up talking about some of them in here as we go along. But one of the big things that you got to look at in the gut is your gut microbiota. Okay, this is the microbiology, the bacteria, the viruses, all of these bugs. That there's a bunch of bugs that should be in there. Okay, they're supposed to be in there. There's a whole ecosystem that's taking place inside of there, and it's part of our health. Okay, that we're still gaining more and more information and research on gut health and the different strains of bacteria that are in our gut, and how beneficial or detrimental they are. Okay, so this is a continual evolution that is taking place, that technology, as it keeps evolving, is helping out with, because there's billions of bacteria that are in our gut. We have a ton of information about things that aren't supposed to be in there already as well. And I call them bad guys. They could be bacteria, they could be parasites, they could be yeast, candida. There's different strains. Some of the big ones you can hear about is like H. pylori. That's a bacteria that affects your stomach. You can have C. diff. That's Clostridia difficile. That's another big one. You can have different types of parasites. So there's these basically these are toxins that once they start to inhabit and replicate in your gut, they become an endotoxin, okay? Meaning an inside toxin that produce a lot of inflammation, stress response, okay? And these are the things that I think of when, I have tons of ladies with hormone issues, okay? So how is this connected to hormone issues? Well, listen, check this out. So if you have H. pylori affects your stomach acid. Your stomach acid's part of its purpose is to break down your vitamins, minerals, proteins, and nutrients. And guess what you need to make hormones? All of those things, right? And so, but what also happens too is that these bacteria, this is technical, but they're called gram-negative bacteria. They produce something called lipopolysaccharides. It has been well researched and documented now that these lipopolysaccharides will or can get into your bloodstream and create the stress response, which comes back up to your brain, triggers your hypothalamus, which is part of your brain, and your pituitary gland, which is a big part of how and why you produce hormones, your hormones change. And so there's all of these connection points that ultimately I can have a woman who has hormonal symptoms and problems, but because they have an infection, an endotoxin happening within their gut, that's actually a bigger part of why it's happening. Even my wife, she had a major toxicity called, mold toxicity, mycotoxins, and she had infertility for many years. And we didn't know that was connected until we got down the path a little ways. And we're like, oh my gosh, look at that. That was definitely connected. And if we had known these things, we could have addressed them sooner, right? And that's definitely my intention to doing these live Q&As and sending out information, because I want you to know sooner. I want you to know that the information's there. We just haven't been taught the application of it all. So I want to give you some application. So coming back around, one of the big things we need to be evaluating in the gut is the gut microbiota, the microbiology, the good guys, the bad guys, and understand, do you have good balance in there? Is there a bunch of infections going on? If there are infections, then what do you need to do about it? What created it? Do you have other environmental toxins that are in there? Okay. The next thing we need to look at in the gut is also digestive insufficiencies. Okay, this could be the stomach acid, like I mentioned, that you need stomach acid to break down vitamins, minerals, proteins, and nutrients. It could be that your gallbladder is not functioning very well, your liver, and so then your bile that's produced in there and bile is being disrupted, and bile is important for breaking down fats. And so if you can't break down fats, then now you're gonna have you could have hormone issues because you need fats for hormones. You could have cell issues because you need fat for cells for regrowth. Your brain is made out of a ton of fat, right? So that could show up as brain fog, lack of clarity, not grabbing on, like having a hard time remembering what you're going to say, all the way up to the dementia, Alzheimer's, right? So there's all of these connection points that trying to give you some perspective and give you some insight and like the big picture here today. But each one of these things really needs a whole, hours worth of communication from me to you about. So know that, again, just keep digging into the information I provide out there, and you'll keep picking this stuff up. But digestive insufficiencies, you got to look at stomach, you got to look at gallbladder, you got to look at your pancreas, and all of these things are actually evaluated like on a stool test. And this isn't what medicine's looking for. Again, like they're looking for the diagnosis, and what I'm really focusing on are the things that build up into the diagnosis. So it's two big things that we need to look at in the gut microbiology, and then also digestive insufficiencies, sufficiencies. The next thing is barrier function. Okay, so think of it. You have a gut lining in there. Lots of people have heard of leaky gut nowadays. I've had a lot of people say, yeah, I've heard of that. And what does that really mean is that the gut itself, the lining is leaky. And so you're leaking the contents within the gut into the bloodstream, okay? And that triggers a lot of inflammation, stress response. It's a big part of a lot of different diagnoses. Actually, leaky gut is. And but what you also want to remember there is that we also have mucous membrane layers that are in our gut, just like in our nose. Think of it like your nose. You have mucous membranes in there. And what's the big purpose of that? To trap stuff. Like that mucus traps stuff that comes in through your nasal passages, and so you have immune system factors in there that will help to kill off those things that shouldn't be coming into your body. Okay, and so it's the same thing in your gut, that there's these mucous membrane layers, that if they get damaged, then your immune system's not going to be doing well. And so then people see that they get sick more often, and sick more often could be like allergies, ear infections, tonsillitis. It could be bronchitis, pneumonia, but then you can also look at things like autoimmune diseases, from rheumatoid to multiple sclerosis. They all have these immune system components to them. And that gut lining is super important for that immune system. And then also it's super important to help with preventing leaky gut. And when that gut becomes leaky, man, you just keep triggering, it keeps causing this vicious feedback loop that triggers your brain, inflammation, stress response. And I keep saying stress response. And if those of you haven't heard me say stress response before, stress response comes from physical, chemical, emotional stressors, basically. And what that does is it actually suppresses and shuts down our gut. And my quick reference to that is like stress response is like if you're getting chased by a bear. If you're getting chased by a bear, you don't need to digest food if you're going to be the food. And because a big part of your immune system's in your gut, it also suppresses your immune system function, because if you're going to get eaten by a bear, it doesn't really matter how strong your immune system is in those moments, right? So anyways, let's keep moving forward. So what have we talked about that need to be evaluated in the gut? The microbiology, bad guys, good guys. What does that look like? The digestive enzymes and sufficiencies, insufficiencies, even like nutrients that should be coming in. Are you actually getting those? You got barrier functions. And now next thing is like inflammation and immune system response. And so that could go back to the mucous membranes. There's other markers. There's one that's very common that people have heard of. It's called calprotectin, which is even medicine can test that, and it can be part of a like IBS IBD diagnosis, so irritable bowel syndrome to irritable bowel disease diagnosis. So there's these other factors on the immune system that need to be evaluated there. What I would say too is that when I look at immune system and inflammation, you've got to look at food testing. And man, that's a whole nother hour-long thing too. But it's you got different types of immune system reactions when it comes to foods. Food allergies, are they anaphylactic type? And then you got the food sensitivities. You got to just realize the only difference really in those things is that a food allergy can create an emergency response, right? So you might need an EpiPen. That could be an emergency in the moment that needs medicine. And so that's very important to understand. And that's typically why medicine just tests that, because that's their job. They use medications, they use EpiPens. So that's what we're going to test. If you don't have those type of reactions, that's fine. You need to be aware of it if you do, even if they're on lower levels that might not quite create anaphylaxis yet. But if you keep triggering it, it might escalate up into that. So you have to have a full evaluation on that side of the spectrum, but then you also have to have a full evaluation on the sensitivity side. And they're not just sensitivities, okay? It's something to take very, very seriously, okay? That just because it doesn't create an emergency, go to the hospital reaction in the moment, it doesn't mean that it's not part of your overall health degeneration picture, okay? That it's going to create stress response. You need to know if your body is reacting to broccoli. That's what I always say. Something that you would not consider as like being like a major issue, because we've been told it's a health food, right? But I have people who they're reacting to something like broccoli, and they need to know that reaction is occurring, is creating stress response, it's creating inflammation. It's part of their problem. So if they take a general recommendation and say, look, I'm going to eat broccoli, and they're and that's like, that's a poor perspective. That's poor advice. Okay. And I have to balance that, like, because I want people to have a better lifestyle, but I'm also very against just general approaches, because my wife suffered, and that's something that I always think of anyways. And we have to be very specific, individualized, that no two people are exactly the same. We got to be analyzed and look at the deeper layers here. So, but food antigen testing is what I call it because it just gets away from the food sensitivity, food allergies. We got to know and understand that that's a big time immune system and inflammation trigger that can damage the mucous membranes. It can create leaky gut. And so that definitely needs to be evaluated when we're looking at inflammation in the gut. And if you are showing some markers of inflammation or not, the food testing is very important. Nervous system testing is also very important, or understanding what's happening with your nervous system. That's because, again, like that whole getting chased by a bear analogy that's called fight or flight. That's a sympathetic response, and it does shut down your gut because, again, you don't need to digest food if you're going to be the food kind of thing, but very simple like that. And it's a big part of also why hormones change too. So understanding nervous system function through some other, through these testing will help as well. Neurotransmitters are also part of that. Okay. So what have we established here is that these are tests, these are advanced tests, these are specialty testing that are looking at the functions. And when these functions become disrupted, then it creates cell change, it creates organ change, tissue change, and then ultimately can create the diagnosis. But see, there's a process that's been brewing and stimulated for a while, usually before you hit that diagnosis. And so we've got to look at these underlying causes. Now, a lot of people are like, well, how do these things become disrupted? Well, let's talk about some of the most common things that happen. Well, I would say the first thing I start to think of is birth process. Okay, during birth process, we see a lot more cesarean births these days, which is basically a surgery. Okay, there's a lot more antibiotic use in those scenarios and situations. That antibiotics is a big problem that destroys the microbiota. Okay, it can serve a purpose. You always have to say that, right? There's some people who need antibiotics. Don't get me wrong, right? But that's because their life needs to be saved, and that's okay in that moment. But what we got to realize is that it can save your life, but it doesn't necessarily make you healthier. Okay, there's a difference between life saving and health. And so we see a lot of antibiotic use in the very beginning. We see a lot of cesarean birth. What that does is that we're supposed to go through the vaginal canal. This has been established for a long time, is that we need to be exposed to the natural bacteria and bacterial flora is what they call that, through the vaginal canal. And if that doesn't happen, it can reduce the stimulation or the support on your immune system function from birth process. Okay. We are born with a leaky gut actually too. And so this is a very important topic that when we get breastfed, we should be getting breastfed. So those who aren't getting breastfed, they're going to minimize and reduce their gut function. They're going to affect their ability for their gut microbiota to grow. There's that getting breastfed, our bodies need those nutrients. And then there's factors within the breast milk that support immune system function. Okay. So this is a natural thing that must happen. And sometimes through cesarean births, mommies aren't able to let down milk, and now baby's hungry. And then here we go into the formula. Some of the, like the formulas will have different product or different ingredients in them, including like high fructose corn syrup, to like hydrogenated oils, to, genetically modified things like soy. Soy is highly genetically modified. Okay. So now the baby's getting foreign materials and toxins that really they weren't designed for. They should have had the breast milk, right? So this birth process, there's a lot of different factors there that can affect our immune system function, that can affect our gut function, if we're getting breastfed or not. If we're able to get breastfed, are we getting breastfed long enough? Are we introducing foods too early? There's a lot of different things that can happen in those early stages that can affect our gut health the rest of our life. All right. So this is a big part of why the microbiomes get disrupted, or these functions can become disrupted, and then later on create diagnosis and symptoms. Although there's a lot of kids who have ear infections, tonsillitis, allergies, problems with their bowel movements, even brand new babies, and they're giving them Miralax. Oh man, that really bugs me. But there's other ways. We'll just say that there's other ways, and that's why we're here today. So from there, what happens too is that we got our standard American diet. I know I did the same thing when I was a little kid. We ate tons of dairy, cereal, lots of sugar, different colorings. It's all like man-made products. It's not real food. I mean, dairy obviously comes from, cows. But we are not a cow. Whereas this is a whole nother topic in itself. That milk is designed to make another 1,500-pound cow. I don't want to be a 1,500-pound cow. It's for baby cows. We can survive off of dairy and cow milk and cow cheese, but it doesn't mean that it's healthy for us again. And so, anyways, our standard American diet is definitely a big part of it, and we have a lot of medication use, whether it's also like over the counter medications from Tylenols to ibuprofens to Advils. They can damage the gut, and then also all the way up to the big stuff from antibiotics. Also, I'd say acid blocking medications, um, up to steroids, and up to like heart blood pressure medications, cholesterol medications. Like there's a lot of those type of medications, depression medications. They will affect your gut, and birth control. So there's so many different factors that will destroy this and affect this. And again, lots of different topics, but giving you a general overview today. All right. So let's swing back around here real quick. Is that what I talked about? What do we need to evaluate in the gut? The gut microbiology, think of it that way: digestive sufficiencies, insufficiencies, barrier functions, immune system, nervous system. These things are the things that need to be evaluated that produce the diagnoses. Okay. So from there, if once these things have been evaluated, then it's important to understand the different stages of healing. So it's crazy that you can have people with the same symptoms. That evaluation looks totally different for each individual. Okay. Some people have different, certain infections, the other ones don't. Different good bacteria, the other ones don't. One person's enzymes are working good, the other one's not. The other one has leaky gut. So like there's all of these different factors that need to be puzzle pieces, if you like that, put them together to understand why these symptoms are happening. Okay. Once we establish that, then you have to understand what is the sequence of care that needs to take place. And so when you look at gut health, one of the first things you got to do is understand what's going on in there and what to remove. Okay. And these are like that standard American diet stuff, but also I think it's just really valuable to get food antigen testing, because that surpasses like all of the diets out there, all the guesswork. Get to the fundamentals of you and how your body's reacting to food so you can remove those. That's the most specific. And then I also do a lot of coaching also around nutrition and different concepts around nutrition. But if you can think of getting away from the standard American diet is really important. It's SAD for the acronym of that, SAD, standard American diet. But then food antigen testing is really important for this. So you got to remove those foods. You got to remove pathogens, right? Whether it's, these different bacterias, yeasts, parasites, molds, heavy metals. There's things that you got to remove, and that's these other toxins, endotoxins, internal toxins, external toxins. If you're living in a house with a bunch of mold, that's going to affect your health big time. If you've got, amalgam fillings in your teeth and there's mercury in there, that may be another contributing factor that you have heavy metal issues, along with have other types of exposures to heavy metals. All right. So we've got to remove the problems. This is another big one, is you got to remove stress. Some people, it's their job. Sometimes it's a relationship. That stress response is coming from a big time emotional issue. And then I have people who've had emotional trauma in the past that really needs to be addressed more thoroughly in like therapy and working with doctors who I think, like psychologists who are focused on, I would say, personal development, like addressing the root causes mentally and not just masking it with more pharmaceuticals, right? So, peeling back the layers on the emotions, because there's a lot of early childhood traumas that can affect the gut health. And then it's also part of why somebody's at where they're at right now as an adult. And so we've got to understand how to remove those factors that are causing stress on the body. And in the gut itself, definitely the different types of pathogens, the different types of foods, the different type of toxins. What we also want to do is work through stages of replacement. If you do have low stomach acid issues, if you have enzyme issues from your pancreas, your gallbladder, those need to be addressed. Making sure you're getting the right nutrients and nutrient density. And that has a lot to do with eating real food, okay? But also evaluating your food antigens to know, like, just because broccoli in general is a lot better than, because I brought up cereal, let's say, but for you, your immune system's not liking the broccoli so much at the moment, and so you need to remove that out. So you need to be very specific about it. All right, so we got to replace with some different types of enzymes for a lot of people. But again, you want to be specific for you. You have to understand: do you need to repair the gut lining? So whether it's the mucous membranes to leaky gut, you gotta understand. Is that a problem for you? And do you need to repair it? And how do you repair it? A lot of it again is removing the problems, and then reinoculate. Now you hear a lot about probiotics. Now probiotics don't actually inoculate, like implant good bacteria into your gut. It supports the growth of good bacteria. Okay. That the stress response, toxins, these are bigger factors on why the gut bacteria are degenerating. And so by removing those, you automatically start to help to regrow the good bacteria. But prebiotics are really important. Think of a lot of veggies are really good prebiotics. They have a lot of good fiber to them. These are things that help you to produce something called short chain fatty acids. This is another thing that needs to be evaluated on stool testing. But the short chain fatty acids, there's a whole ecosystem that one bacteria produces one thing that another bacteria eats off of, and then another bacteria eats off of it, and it's like this whole circle of life thing. And so evaluating those and understanding how to support them through prebiotics, think veggies again. I mean, probiotics are fine, but do you really need them? What other things support short chain fatty acids? Definitely fat consumption, so good fats as well. We'll talk about that in a minute, but for some people, we really got to rebuild up those good bacterias. And then another stage of healing for the gut is to rebalance. Okay, and what does that mean? A lot when I think of rebalance, I think of hormones and what's known as the HPA-TG axis. Now, what does that stand for? It's hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, thyroid, gonadal. Okay, axis. Now that's how all the hormones are working together, which again, the immune system, the gut will trigger those things to change. We really need to address our stressors in our life. And a lot of people have a lot of big time emotional stressors, and we got to understand how to get around them. Some people have changed careers, got out of relationships, but also how to manage those if you can't, right? Or you don't want to, right? So how do you manage your stressors? And there's lots of different techniques on this. One of my favorites is actually exercise or just movement and getting out into nature. So it's not so much that, that you're removing the stress in your life. It's like, how do you cope with it in a healthy way? Because other people you could do the other things that damage the gut. Like maybe here's another one: drink a lot, right? So people drink a lot of alcohol, that'll damage the gut. That's another toxin. And maybe it helps them to cope with the stress in their life, but yet it's creating more problems as they go along, right? So we have to cope in healthy ways and then not minimize it. Well, it's just a little bit of alcohol, or it's a little bit of marijuana or something. And marijuana's health, like a natural, right? Something like that. I've heard it all, but don't just cope with it with stuff that masks it, address it, and do healthy things to cope with it if you need to. And exercise is a great one for that. That's one of my favorite forms of meditation, is what I call it. So we'll talk about some more of that in just a minute here as we're finishing up. But we do need to rebalance the hormonal axes and rebalance like the immune system. A lot of people, when you get maybe an autoimmune diagnosis, they always say that the body's attacking itself. And there's some research in physiology and understanding about that seems to be the issue, like that the body is technically kind of in a way attacking itself. But I have a hard time going there. Think of it like this: if you're hitting your head and I'm hitting my head on my desk and I create this symptom right here, and I don't find out basically how I'm hitting my head, it can seem like your body's attacking itself because you just keep hitting your head, and like you haven't evaluated deep enough to find out, how the body and why the body's reacting and why the immune system's reacting in this situation. And so I guess what that basically boils down into is that people aren't getting evaluated in a functional medicine model. So things are being neglected. They're being skimmed over. There's like 1,000 different things that could have been looked at instead of just saying that the body was attacking itself. We're evaluating the immune system through autoimmune lenses, and it can appear like those cells are, or your body is actually damaging those cells on purpose, but we still don't know how we're hitting our head, right? So some more perspective, kind of rambling on that one, but but understand that we got to calm down the hormones, we got to calm down the immune system, and a big way to do that again is to rebuild this gut health, this gut restoration. Okay, so we've gone through these different stages now of. So let me say this. Let me sum up here. Is what we do. What we talk about first is the question is how do we know if our gut is unhealthy, and how do we know if it's connected to other symptoms? And so I've kind of covered some of those different things. And then also understanding that, just because you may or may not have gut symptoms doesn't mean that you don't have gut problems. A lot of times we have symptoms in other places of the body. I just went through the stages of gut healing. Really, there's different aspects based off of testing that we've got to remove things, we've got to replace things, we've got to repair things, we've got to help support a lot of times rebuilding of the microbiome. And that does not necessarily mean that you just take probiotics, although it's a very general common thing that people do even in the natural world. And then you have to rebalance your life, really looking at the physical, chemical, and emotional stressors, and make sure that you know how to avoid them, how to cope with them, and be consistent over time on a daily basis. Okay, because health is always a journey, it's always in process. It's about our habits and rituals. And if we don't have good habits and rituals, I mean, you can only be motivated for so long. And in some ways, that's where diagnoses and symptoms are helpful, because they do motivate us. But if we want long-term health, we got to realize that a lot of those symptoms and conditions can go away. And now what's going to motivate us, right? What are you going to use as leverage? What's going to be your why? And so we need to reestablish balance back to our life. All right. So last thing here is, what are some lifestyle changes that we can make right now to support our gut health? I've kind of mentioned a few things here, but I'd say number one, remove the SAD, SAD acronym. Okay. Standard American diet. It's SAD. Okay. There's lots of sugar. There's lots of dairy. There's lots of gluten. Okay. So let's talk about that. So I call them the big five. Take out gluten. Okay. It's not a fad. It's going to create leaky gut. It's going to be a component to leaky gut. And our wheat has definitely changed. When I look at nutrients, I'm like, man, veggies is always better than those grains. Okay. Because they're different phytochemicals, the different parts and components to those veggies. Okay. So we're optimizing our foods. And I was thinking, you have to allocate your time, money, your resources, spend the time and money on the things that are most beneficial. Okay. Veggies, when it comes to the microbiome, if we have to choose between veggies and grains, always choose the veggies. All right. So standard American diet. So get gluten out of there, get dairy out of there. That includes cheese. I would take out all animal milk and cheese. We are not those animals. We're the only mammal who are drinking milk and using milk products past infancy. Okay, we could talk all day long about this. Take out dairy. Next thing, corn. Corn's highly genetically modified. It's very inflammatory. When you eat corn on the cob, it comes out corn off the cob. Our bodies don't like it. Number four is going to be soy. Soy is another highly genetically modified product. It's in a lot of different things. It could be called soy lecithin in a lot of different products. Get away from the soy. All right. Next thing is the refined products, refined sugars, the boxes, the bags. We want real food. Okay. And that's some of the big major components to the standard American diet. So we want to remove those things. We want to be aware of other environmental toxins like GMOs. So again, corn and soy are highly genetically modified. When you look at, when you look at those products, they use a lot of different chemicals on them. And that's another one to be aware of, is glyphosate. So glyphosate is weed killer, like Roundup. Okay. That's one of the main chemicals in Roundup. But on the genetically modified crops, they use Roundup on there. And the chemical again is called glyphosate, and it's basically an antibiotic. Okay. And so it kills the microbiology of the soil. It kills everything but that genetically modified plant. Okay, I call that frankenfood as well. So understand that we minimize these GMOs, get them out of our nutrition. Part of it's because they do have chemicals like herbicides, like glyphosate, that can definitely damage our bodies, our immune system, our gut. Mold. Okay, mold's another one. If you have mold in your house, if you have water damaged house, you go to work in a water damaged building, These are other environmental factors that you need to be aware of. Body care products, a lot of different petroleum based things in there, flame retardants. So that's all skincare, hair care, makeup, anything that you're putting on your body. You need to understand that that can affect your microbiome on your skin, because you do have a microbiome on your skin, but also on the inside. It can affect your hormones. You got a lot of hormone disruptors in those things. Medications, again, guys, like you know, I'm not gonna say I don't, if you know, like, I can't sit here on social media, on YouTube, and give you doctor recommendations, because you're not a patient, right? Like, and it takes very specific, again, analysis to understand what you need to do. So when it comes to medications, you also, like, you got to understand that if a doctor puts you on medications, you need to talk to your doctor about these medications. Okay. But you got to realize that things like antibiotics, acid blocking medications, even the over the counters, the aspirins, the Advils, the ibuprofens, these can damage the gut. Okay. And so you have to have these conversations with your doctor. I mean, the over the counters, you can get those at the store. You can make those decisions on your own. People are using those things a lot of times for inflammatory issues. And so, take these things that I'm talking about today and apply them, and avoid, and don't allow yourself to go to taking the over the counter medications at all. Like, if you can possibly do that, don't, damage your gut. You think about these things again. And so minimize the inflammation. If you are on prescribed medications, then talk to your doctor about it. At least have an awareness today that they can be part of the problem. All right. And so when you're like, how did this happen? Understand that those medications can be part of the problem, right? So you got to understand that that's a big part of also why gut health is a problem, because in America, especially, we take a lot of medications. All right. So they could be a contributing factor. Next thing, what can we do as far as lifestyle? What can we add in? All right. What can we add in? Lots of organic veggies, number one, and fruits. Okay. There's a lot of different components to that will help your gut health, help rebuilding your microbiome. You want to have good, clean fats from olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil. These are great oils that you want to bring into your nutrition. You want great grass-fed, 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef, buffalo. You want pasture-raised, free-range chicken and turkey. You want wild-caught fish in the ocean, not farm-raised. All right. Check out some of my other videos about those type of things, because I do go into more details, and I need to get to wrapping up here today. We've been on 50 minutes so far. So we got to understand, get to the good veggies, some fruits, good fats, lots of good protein. Animal proteins definitely need to be 100% grass-fed, free range, no antibiotics, no hormones, because that can also affect your microbiome. All right. Lots of good nuts and seeds. Make sure that they are also raw, sprouted, not roasted. All right. So those are some foods to add in for sure. Also, what else? We could do the fermented foods, and sauerkraut and kimchi. Don't go to. I would say you don't have to. Again, don't go towards the dairy stuff. Right. So next thing is exercise and movement. And now part of that is what I explained earlier, is that exercise and movement can help you release some of the stress response in your body, right? You do release endorphins when you exercise. Endorphins will help to calm you down. Dopamine gets stimulated, or it can. Just don't go too crazy on the exercise, because it can. You can go on the other side of it all. It could add some more stress on your body, especially if your body is really stressed out physically, chemically, and emotionally, that you need to keep it a little more gentle. So exercise and movement combined with basically that stress response and stress relief. Get out in nature. We're supposed to be out in nature, and so get out in nature as much as you can too as well, but get moving. And obviously at this point, you've got to get functional medicine testing. Okay. You can do things on a general approach to start if you want to, but without the specificity, without the understanding of these factors that I've gone over today for you, what's actually happening for you, then you're just delaying more problems in a way. Maybe if you're just changing your lifestyle factors, you're not getting to the root causes. You don't know exactly what's going on, and because our health is our greatest asset, that is a very slippery slope, and not what I would advise at all. And why do I advise that? Because that's what I did. Okay. That's what I did in the past. Lived an extremely healthy lifestyle in a general approach, and because of that, we were still missing things, and it really ended up with my wife being severely sick. And the topic of mold toxicity is a big one in itself, but she basically had mold toxicity that nobody in medicine was even getting close to. Like that was not even part of the possible conversation. And that's what I think about is like we'd have never got to that in a medical approach. She'd have just been diagnosed with some autoimmune disease at some point and been told that her body was attacking itself, but yet it was mold toxicity and gut issues and immune system issues that needed to be addressed specifically for her. And so that's why I harp on this so much is don't guess on your health. You got to get functionally tested to see what the root causes are based off your lifestyle. What are the things you've been exposed to? Because you've been exposed to different things and in the different scenarios in your life. How has the gut changed? How have your hormones changed? How's your immune system changed? How has your metabolic system changed? There's these different systems within your body that you have to be evaluated for to understand how it's all working together. All right, so let's wrap up. Hope that was a great information for you today. If you do have any questions, I just see a couple questions here. I'll answer those when we get done. If you do have some questions that come up, you can email me at info@drgunyon.com. That's info@drgunyon.com. So info@drgunyon.com. You can direct message me. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can write comments in there as well when you come back and look at these replays. Remember, I'm doing these live Q&As every week on Wednesday, and it's been Wednesday mornings at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time is what we've really narrowed it down into. So look out for them. Tell others that need to hear this information, and so they can pop on to these resources. I know a lot of people, they say, well, I have friends and family that aren't on social media. And I'm like, well, are they on YouTube? That's why I'm doing YouTube, because YouTube is definitely a huge search engine. And I want to make sure that they're getting the information from a true perspective from somebody who really cares about it, and really cares about people. And what's always been my difference of being a doc is that I've had to live through experiences. I didn't just read in a book. I didn't just think that was interesting. I didn't even ever think that I'd be a functional medicine doctor. But when my wife got sick again, nobody else was figuring it out. Nobody seemed to care enough. So I was already a doctor at the time. I'm like, we're going to figure this out, right? We're smart. My wife's a nutritionist. We'll figure it out. We'll get this done because nobody's going to care about it as much as we care about it. And that's why I talk about caring for people, because I really do. Okay. I really do, because I know what it's like to suffer. Right. And so, but I also think of this is that I can't take responsibility for other people's health. They have to want to change it themselves too. So I just want to empower people, but you have to make the decisions. You have to make a decision to hold yourself accountable, because nobody can do that for you. You have to do it yourself. Well, I'll stop right there. I love mindset stuff too. Anyways. All right, guys, you have a great day. Let me know if you need anything. Look forward to next week. We'll be back live next week, next Wednesday, live Q&A at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And I'll see you then. Have a great day.